9 o'clock, and so I went on the website and I looked and I was like, huh, hmm. So check again. And all day long, I kind of kept it there and I would keep looking back at it. And finally, I put it in my Adobe software and highlighted my number. Because I kept thinking, like, surely I've looked at the wrong number. Surely this is a mistake.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to Hanging Out with Successful Bar Exam Takers. And we have a real treat today. One of my favorite students that I've had to work with, or gotten to work with in the last couple of years, Claire Walls, is with us. And Claire, you're now a successful Florida bar taker, or passer, right?
I am.
How does that feel?
Mostly relief.
That's fair. That's a fair answer, isn't it? This has
It
been
is.
this has been quite a climb for you, and not an easy journey necessarily. Sometimes people think everybody just wakes up one day and they decide to take the bar and then they pass, and end of story. But for you, it's been a bit more complicated, hasn't it?
Sure. I was not successful in my first attempt, so I
Okay.
had to gear up and do it again.
Yeah, and that's challenging. Well, why don't we back up just a little bit, and why don't you tell people a little bit about your background and what led you to, you're already a successful licensed attorney in West Virginia, correct?
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about what caused you to give that up or want to add Florida to your resume.
Okay. I first became licensed in West Virginia, and at this point, I'm also licensed in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Um, I have a practice that's centered in those states. My daughter moved to South Florida a few years ago, and I'm stalking my daughter.
Okay, well, honesty counts here. All right.
So I decided that I wanted to at least have a part-time residence in Florida, and I got the idea that it would be best and prudent to be licensed to practice law in Florida since I might want to eventually live in Florida full time. So I just thought it was a good idea to have my license in that jurisdiction. So
Yeah, but you're
that
running
is
a
my,
very yeah you're running a very active law practice, though, correct?
it's pretty busy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
And so you made the decision to sit for the Florida exam, and you spent some of your time in Florida and some of your time, I think, in West Virginia, right?
Yeah,
I know we had
yeah,
some conferences while you were in West Virginia. And
yeah.
what was that like? One of the questions I get from people is, what is it like to balance a law practice with studying for the bar? Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's difficult for sure. I think for me, because I have my own practice and I'm in charge of it, it was a little easier for me to sort of delegate things for a period of time, at least the first time I took it, because I planned for that for several months. And so I was able to block out a little more time so that I could have wider, just, more time during the day, like 2 or 3 hours at a time, which you don't normally get in a law practice. And I didn't want it to always be, 8:30 in the evening because I knew I wouldn't really be worth much for studying at that point. So I know myself it was important to me that I was able to study during sort of work hours because that's when I'm the most awake and alert and not tired. So um, it's doable. The second time I took it, I did not have as much of an ability to block out time the way I did the first time because of course, I wasn't expecting to fail. So I didn't really think that far ahead. The second time was a little tougher. I just had to squeeze it in when I could, and I had to travel a lot. So I was doing a lot of listening to lectures and reading outlines on planes.
Yeah.
Sitting in offices wherever I could. It was kind of when I was in law school, I had a child, and I remember at that time I sort of took my books with me everywhere, and it was kind of like this for me the second time. I took my materials with me, books, whatever, but I just made sure I had that with me at all times so that if I had a free half hour or even 15 minutes to review something, I could do it. So that was kind of the second time around. It was really just sort of squeezing it in where I could. And, if I
Yeah.
ended up having a slow day, then I would just, really take advantage of that time. So,
Yeah. So on this first time through, you were in our personal coaching program, so you and I
yes,
were talking about your work,
yes,
and you were very diligent about doing the work, but it was a big challenge for you to get back into the mode of study and
yes.
taking the bar. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it was. It was kind of like starting from scratch. It had been many, many years since I went to law school and took a bar exam, and my practice is very, very focused in just a few areas. And so learning civil procedure and evidence and these things, it was completely new to me almost, you know.
Yeah.
They were just sort of vague concepts and vocabulary words in my mind at that point, and I really didn't have much of a current understanding of it. So I really did have to start from scratch.
Yeah. And the writing was different too, the writing approach that we were teaching you.
Yes. The writing style was great. You know, I hadn't done IRAC in all those years, so it wasn't like I was trying to unlearn that.
Yeah.
Um, but the FLA style that you teach, I found to be very useful in managing the material. It gives you an outline before you sit down to write. If you're not sure what to write, you can kind of go with the outline and, you know, come up with something. And I found that to be super helpful because I think most people have trouble, you know, when you're sitting down at a test under time conditions, sometimes it's hard to come up with the things that you know.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know
And
them. If you had 2 hours to write it, you'd be great. But sometimes when you've got that time pressure, it's just really hard to pull that out. So the FLA helps with that, I think, a
yeah.
lot.
I've had bar takers, particularly adults who are licensed elsewhere, say that the Florida bar is a little intimidating. You walk in and you've got so many people, so many young people in particular. It feels a little weird, doesn't it, as an adult
All
going in
kinds of people. I was
there?
surprised at the diversity of people
Yeah.
taking the Florida bar exam. Young people, it is mostly young, recent grads, but lots of older people were there.
Yeah.
I was really surprised at that. Um, yeah, it's not a fun atmosphere at all. Not that you would expect it to be fun, but it's uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
the biggest thing for me that I think is helpful to people to know is the whole like eating is hard, and you got to sort of figure that out ahead of time.
Yeah.
And the second time around, I actually made sure I had a room with a refrigerator, and I went to the grocery store and I
Oh,
had all my
great.
meals in the fridge, so I didn't have to worry. You know, I was walking distance, so I went back to my room and I had my little salad or whatever it was I packed, and I was able to eat my breakfast in my room, so I didn't have to be stressed about getting into a restaurant and having to wait and, you know, waiting for my check and that causing anxiety. I just didn't want to deal with any of that the second time, so it was a
That's
much
a
more
great
relaxed.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really helped me get control of the atmosphere as much as possible.
Yeah.
They only give you, I think, an hour for lunch, and it's just, it's not really enough time. And by the end of 3 hours, you're hungry, hangry.
Yeah, you're hangry. That's it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you went to take the bar the first time. You had been prepping, working hard. It was I use the analogy sometimes. We're climbing a mountain and we start base camp is in the valley and we come up the mountain. And you were making pretty good progress. And I think we both felt pretty optimistic that you were going to get through the exam the first time. But you didn't. You didn't miss by a lot, did you?
No, I didn't,
No.
but I
And
missed.
but let's talk a little bit about what that's like, because I think it's important, and I appreciate so much that you're willing to share your story. But it is very discouraging when that result comes out, even for somebody with a practice in 3 states who's been successful. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like emotionally for you?
Sure, it is discouraging. You know, after I took the test, I wasn't confident that I had passed, but I thought there was a chance. So actually, my perception was pretty close because I was close to passing, and in my
Yeah.
mind, I wasn't sure. So I was right in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is discouraging, but the helpful thing about Florida is when you fail, they send you a breakdown of your performance in all the different areas, how you did on each essay, how you did in each subject area, and that was super helpful to me because I had a real seesaw. You know, I did really well in some areas and very poorly in just a couple, and that was enough to sink me. Just those couple areas, for whatever reason, and who knows, I didn't do well in a
Right.
couple of areas, and
So we pointed out some of those areas, and you were also using photo reading, correct?
I did. Hmm.
Yeah. And so when you went back, now you're ready, you made a decision that you were going to resit the exam. Was that a hard decision to make, or were you pretty committed to doing that?
You know, I knew I was going to do it, but I didn't start studying for 2 weeks because I was just kind of like, you know, just mostly annoyed that I hadn't passed, and I just didn't really, you know, like, oh, I've got to gear up and do this whole thing again. And I knew I would do it, but it just took me a minute to sort of get the motivation to do it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you know, thankfully and luckily, the subject that I did the very worst on was, and I followed the syllabus the second time, it was the very first subject. So of course you want to hit that thing that you screwed up on. And so that was one of the subjects was the first one. So um, that made me feel better to be able to get right on that again and figure
Yeah.
out what.
And with the photo reading, were you mind mapping also?
The mind mapping was really important to me. I did a lot of mind mapping. The first time I took the test in my studies, I didn't really get the memo about mind mapping until about halfway through. And I started doing it, but the second time I really spent a lot of time mind mapping. So some of those earlier subjects I hadn't really mind mapped. So I did at this time. The subjects I did poorly on, I spent a lot of time mind mapping. The mind mapping's great. I know a lot of people think it's time consuming, and it kind of is, but even when you don't have a lot of time, and I did this frequently, the way the procedures that you start with the larger subject and you go, you nest. But even if you only have 15 minutes, and I would do this, I would just get a subject that I felt confused about, like, third party beneficiary contracts, and just do a mind map about that. Even if I only had a few minutes, it was something that was always hazy, so just do it. Once you do it, it's kind of like you've got it. Once you draw it out and do the mind map, I feel like it really does help your mind to activate the information in a way that reading just doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, and I think that's important for people that aren't fully understanding what we're talking about here. The concept is that instead of taking a linear set of notes, you actually draw out sort of like a spoke and hub or tree with branches, and you're putting out that information, and then you're adding to the mind map as you work, so it's dynamic, and you're getting a visual representation of the material, right? And then you take the big subject and you nest down as you keep drilling down further. So I think it's a great idea. You take a particular subtopic and you say, I'm not entirely clear on that. And you start a new mind map just for that subject, right? And then it's there. Did you read your mind maps out loud to yourself at all?
I did somewhat. You had suggested that I do that. I didn't read all of them out loud, but I did that.
Yeah.
It reminded me there were in law school when we were taking, like the appellate ad class and trial ad, and they would say practice in the mirror. And I hadn't done that since then, but it was kind of like that idea that once you're sort of speaking it out loud, you kind of become more comfortable with it. And again, it's just another way to get that material in your mind and, understand it and be comfortable with it.
So in preparing for the second time around, now you're starting to go back to our mountain climbing analogy, you're starting now not in the valley, but your base camp's up a lot higher. So now you're focused on... In theory. And you're focused on particularly an emphasis on areas where you had been weaker on the first test. Yeah. But it's harder emotionally and it's tougher logistically because now it's like, oh my God, now I've been studying for a year instead of 6 months, right? And you used our retake, and so now you're in the basic course, and you're just taking the skills that you've been taught, and you're employing those. Yeah. What's it like going back to the exam the second time? How is it different? You talked about food. I think that's a great tip. Anything else that was different for you in going back a second time?
Just the familiarity with the place and what the whole scene is and what that's going to be like, and I wasn't nearly as nervous the second time. And I think that was a big issue for me the first time. I had a ton of anxiety and, I was hungry. I couldn't figure out the whole eating thing, which seems really silly to have sort of, not made sure I had that. But it's weird there. And you don't have a lot of time. There's a lot of people. And, it was better. It's very annoying, that whole situation there. They make you wait in line.
Right.
For probably 20 minutes, and then you get into your seat, and it's another 45 minutes before the test begins, and you're just kind of sitting there rotting away, waiting for the test to start.
Yeah. It is a mind, they do some weird things to your head, no doubt.
It's tough.
And so this exam in July was a particularly tough exam. There were some interesting things. There was professionalism for the first time ever, and there was dependency, and there was federal constitutional law as the essays. What was your reaction after the morning on Tuesday? Because those were kind of strange essays.
Honestly, I knew to be prepared for anything.
Okay.
That dependency, they tested it the year before, and so sort of the prevailing wisdom would be they're not going to test it again. But I thought, no. And I actually had done the sample dependency essay like a week before that test. So
Good.
I saw that and I was like, okay, I feel okay about this one. I'm prepared. Yeah, I mean, who knows what's gonna, you just don't know. They can test anything,
Right.
anytime. It's probably not going to be something you expect. And so I think
Yeah.
the idea and what you have always said, you just have to, you just sort of, I mean, you can't know everything, obviously. Nobody can, and it's not possible, but you just have to touch everything as much as you can and try to
Right.
just be prepared for them to
Right.
have like three essays on one subject, or who knows what they'll do.
Anything's possible. That's right. And
Anything's
then,
possible.
yeah, and then Florida multiple choice in the afternoon, which is horrific.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And you use the intuitive method of answering multiple choice questions, right? You didn't linger over the questions as you were answering them.
Right, right. Speed was never my problem with multiple choice. I was always pretty good at getting through those quickly, so I never had a time issue. But yeah, that definitely helps. I don't know exactly how I did. I passed the test. That's all that matters.
That's all
But
that matters.
I don't know which ones I did better on or worse this
Yeah.
time. So
It's
you
okay.
know.
Passing is passing.
Yeah,
Um,
but the Florida questions, they are strange and
yeah,
quirky. But again, you prepare us for that, the
right,
fact that they're odd and we have a lot of sample questions and, it's just it is what it is. You deal with it.
right. Um, and when the exam was, and then of course multi-state on Wednesday, and you've been through multi-state, so you knew pretty much what to expect there.
Right.
Um, when the exam was over, what was your reaction this time as compared to the first time?
I felt like I did better.
Hmm.
I felt like I did a little better and I only needed to do a little better and I did do a little better and I
That's
passed.
all it takes, man. It's
I did
anything
not
over.
do like vastly better. I did
Yeah.
enough better to pass. So,
Right, and that's the point. And I think
yeah,
sometimes people get locked into this idea that you got to have 30, 40, 50 point increases, but you don't. Sometimes what you need is 3 or 4 points. And
right,
finding those 3 or 4 points is all the difference in the world. So
right.
tell me a little bit about what it was like when results came out. Where were you? What were you doing? What happened?
So I was, working. I knew it was around 9 o'clock, and so I went on the website and I looked, and I was like, huh, hmm. So check again, and all day long I kind of kept it there, and I would keep looking back at it, and finally I put it in my Adobe software and highlighted my number. Because I kept thinking, like, surely I've looked at the wrong number. Surely this is a mistake. I texted my daughter and my fiance and told them what had happened and my employees, because I'm sure they were afraid. They were probably like, let's not say anything. She might fail again.
Yeah, yeah, got that.
So
And
yeah, it was definitely a relief and just kind of really did take, I still feel like I can't believe I finally passed it, but, I did. So
it's awesome. And did your daughter say, okay, mom, so now you're really stalking me?
no, not at all.
No,
No.
she's excited to have you come down, right?
Yeah, no, because we went to dinner a few nights before and we had this conversation and I said, I don't know if I'm going to do it again. I just don't know how much time I can spend in this bar exam moment, but maybe I'll pass.
There you go.
Yeah, you might, but she was kind of like, yeah, I don't know.
Well, and the statistics are, so unfavorable for repeat bar takers that it's huge. I mean, it's about a 30% pass rate. So it's a big accomplishment. And so congratulations on so many different levels. So now you've got you're past the Florida bar. You're barred in 3 other states. You going to take any more bar exams? Or are you?
No, I don't think so. But I do have that updated MPRE score, so I can waive into states with that. Because a lot
There
of
you go.
states, because I'm
Yeah,
licensed in 3 other states that actually let you waive into other
yeah,
states. So
yeah,
I've been thinking about that. But then you have to go through the whole character and fitness and
yeah.
prevail upon everyone you've ever known to fill out a form and send it in.
Fun, huh?
I
Yeah,
don't
fun
know.
times.
Yeah, I
Well,
don't
good,
know. We'll
good.
see. Shell out a bunch of money. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, fair. That's fair enough. Well,
Maybe.
what you have any suggestions or comments or recommendations for people who might be just starting this process now, based on your own experience?
Um, so if you're a celebration bar student, just definitely follow the syllabus. I think that is really helpful. And, I didn't do much with the group coaching, but I did always listen to the Friday afternoon. I didn't always listen to them live. There's a Friday afternoon seminar, and it's offered, you can go back and listen to it later. And that was very helpful to me for many reasons. Many important questions were answered that people had, and they were things, I may not have thought of, but were important things I needed to know. And also just encouragement, knowing that you're going through this with other people, and it is a huge struggle for every single person who's dealing with it, and it's unpleasant, and it's not fun, and it's always good to know that you're not the only one dealing with that. And so I think those the calls, and I'm sure the group coaching too, and I know a lot of people get a lot out of that, and I think it's kind of the same idea though, just more of a one-on-one thing, or with a group.
Yeah.
So I think taking advantage of those things is something that people should definitely try to do, because I think it's encouraging, and it kind of keeps your eye on the ball. And I always feel like group energy pushes everyone forward. So
now, you chose the personal coaching program. Was that helpful to you? I mean,
Very
no pressure,
helpful.
but
Very helpful. Well, so the big advantage is learning the writing style and having the conferences with you, and really honing that, because it's a little different. And so it's and like I said, just being able to parse through a very long fact pattern and breaking that out into what it is you need to write about, and not going off on some irrelevant tangent like I would do sometimes. Just having somebody read that and say, like, okay, no, that's not really where you need to be going. You need to be here. And just, having that guidance was helpful.
Well, you were a delight to work with, and a great student. You took all of our comments and suggestions and employed them, and I thought that it was particularly notable that, in spite of the disappointment and discouragement of not passing, that you did pick yourself back up and went back at it and really worked on the weak areas and improved them. And I have to say, I was not surprised that you passed. So but I know it doesn't. It's still tough no matter what, and no matter where you are, and what the circumstance is. So I really encourage people, if you're feeling like, oh my God, am I ever going to get through this? Your story is a great one to sort of remind them that it can be done, even when you got a lot of other things on your plate.
Yeah, it definitely can, and it isn't fun, and it isn't easy, but one day at a time, just keep going.
That's it. Well, I really appreciate the fact that you came out to share your story. I know it will help a lot of other people. I wish you the very best. I hope that you enjoy coming to Florida, being with your fiance and your daughter, and enjoying the warm weather here, and just being part of our community. I know you've stayed in our Facebook group and offered your help and support to existing students, so we very, very much appreciate that. It's one of the nice things about our course is that our alums stick around and they help out. So that's a great thing.
And I'm happy to help. And I've said that to people, if anybody feels like, and if there's anything I could do to help, I'm not sure what it would be, but if there is, I'm happy to help. So
well, that's great. Well, Claire, thank you again, and congratulations. We're so proud of you and pleased for you. And for all of you out there in our audience, thanks for being with us today. And with that, we're going to sign off, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye, everybody.